If you've ever wondered how to land a software engineering internship before graduation, this conversation is for you. We have Gabe here, who is a software engineer at Lockheed Martin. He started his journey there as a software engineering intern while still a student at Towson University. So he's going to share how he landed the internship, what the interview process was like, what helped him earn a full-time offer, and the advice he has for folks hoping to follow a similar path. Gabe, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure speaking with you tonight.
Of course. All right, so let's get right into it, Gabe. So tell us about this software engineering internship. What did you do before you applied that made you a competitive candidate? It's tough out there in the job market these days.
Oh, big time, big time. But I would say probably the number one thing I did was the fact that I leveraged the assignments and the tasking that I did during my college classes. Because of course, as an undergrad, I had very minimal experience in the software engineering space. So I had to convince the hiring managers basically to take a chance on me. And I did so by kind of really leveraging the semester long group projects that I was doing, the personal projects that I was doing in class, the little code programs that I would make throughout the years. And I really leaned in on the conversation around the tools, technologies, frameworks, et cetera, that I used during those projects. And I used that to convey to the hiring managers what I knew basically and what I could do for whatever role I was interviewing for.
Nice. I like that you mentioned personal projects and some things like, so you didn't have professional experience or volunteer experience or anything like that, or done a previous internship before this, right?
No, it was my first internship interviewing process.
Okay. So the projects and everything that you talked about that you worked on during the semester, are those things that you highlighted in your resume? So you highlighted those in your resume, then submitted it to the hiring manager, and they were interested enough and called you back?
Yeah, pretty much. I my personal rule of thumb is that you should only put projects that you're basically fully completed. So I in particular I had this one project from my final year in college where we made basically a full-fledged web-based application. It's kind of like a big YouTube wrapper, but basically it was a search engine where you could input any topic that you wanted to learn about. Let's say you wanted to learn how to cook ravioli, and then it would generate a bunch of videos and even give you like a text-based breakdown on how to cook whatever dish of choice that you were searching up. And that was kind of like the overarching project. And that's what I included on my resume. And I've had multiple conversations with hiring managers and interviewers about that specific project.
Awesome. I love that. I love that you mentioned that because, sometimes folks don't think the work that they're doing in class or some of the projects are worth it to put it on their resume. Folks think I just have to put professional work experience, or if I have some volunteer experience, or maybe I did some extracurriculars, all those are great to include, but especially if you don't have those, emphasize those projects in class. So that's awesome. I'm glad that you mentioned a little bit about the what you've included on your resume. So after you submitted your resume, a hiring manager calls you. So tell us about the interview process with the hiring managers. How did that look? Was it mostly behavioral questions, situational questions, group interviews, panel interviews? Tell us more about that, if you can.
Sure, of course. So my interview was one in person. So there was a real face-to-face personality interaction component to it. But I would say it was a good even mix of behavioral and technical. Most of the technical questions that they asked revolved around like object-oriented programming, basic computer science related questions. And then they also asked me questions kind of involving like the tools and main concepts that are used particularly at my department in Lockheed Martin. For example, I had a question on what multi-threaded processing was because that's something we use very heavily in our software products. So I had to be able to speak on that a little bit. But and speaking on the behavioral questions, They were kind of basic ones, involving questions such as, tell me about a time where you messed up and maybe you had to take ownership of your mistake and how you rectified it. Or they asked me to explain how I collaborate with other members, especially professional team members. Um, Kind of just general behavioral questions. But there was one question in particular that really stuck with me even after the interview. It was, how would you build a three-legged chair? And the reason why that question, actually, you know what? I'll even take a step back and ask you, Amen, how would you build a three-legged chair?
Wow. So I'm in the interview now. How would I build a three-legged chair? I
Hmm.
think in an interview, if somebody asked me that, the first thing I would talk about is kind of the blueprint that I would follow for it. And I'm thinking about the balance and how the chair is going to balance. Maybe I'll have two of the legs in front and the leg in the back is going to be in the middle. And I'm just thinking about, a little bit how people balance and how people sit on a chair. I mean, I think I'd make it out of wood. Am I on the right track? What'd you end up answering there?
I'll tell you, but that line of thinking is exactly what the hiring manager was looking for. You're
Yes.
basically thinking like an engineer. Like the general concept was they're looking for someone who is going to ask a lot of questions, get all of the details, fully map out and do the planning ahead of time before they actually ever buy the tools or buy the materials to build this hypothetical three-legged chair. So basically, what I ended up responding was, well, what type of chair do you want? Do you want a wooden chair, like you mentioned? Is it going to be made out of wood? Is it going to are the legs going to be oriented in a triangle shape? Are they going to be kind of like in a cylindrical shape? Where is this chair going to be placed? All of these questions kind of reveal your line of thinking, and that's exactly what they're looking for in terms of new hires. They really want to understand your thinking. They want to know that you can ask the right questions and carefully plan, carefully like collaborate, because that's exactly the type of skills that are going to be absolutely vital when you're working as a software engineer, especially at Lockheed Martin, because there's just too much to know and no one person ever knows it all. So you really have to be able to pick up things on the fly, work with others, and ask the right questions to get to the end result.
I like that. That's awesome. You know,
Thank you.
sometimes in interviews you get those trick questions and you're like, why would somebody even ask me that? And then, sometimes folks freeze in the middle of the interview because of questions like that. But you have to think, okay, this job wants me to problem solve. They want me to be able to question, they want me to be able to collaborate, they want me to work as a team. So with every single question, you should probably be thinking about, some of those key skills that the employer, the hiring manager really wants out of you. I mean, when you mentioned some of the questions as well that they asked you, I was thinking it's really helpful to add a story. So when you answering those questions, instead of just saying, yes, I work well with people, instead, did you explain a project in which you were working with people so they can see that kind of work rather than just hear you say it?
Yeah, I would hope that I'm pretty sure that I did. Hopefully, I
I know
did
it's tough
back
to
then.
remember everything from it.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I mean, my interviewing style now, I definitely do try to incorporate personal anecdotes, stories, etc., rather than just giving a definitive, this is what I do in XYZ situation. Um, for example, if I were to be asked now, explain to me a time where, I messed up, I would probably talk about maybe there was a moment where I missed a deadline. Okay, so I would then say, okay, I was tasked with this certain assignment and it was due in 2 weeks, but I couldn't get it done until 2 weeks and 3 days. So before that deadline, I reached out to the kind of lead engineer who's kind of in charge of the tasking for that program. I would reach out to them and say, hey, I'm not going to meet this deadline, but I will be done on XYZ date, and I need these resources in order to be able to finish as quickly as possible. would you be able to work with me, give me an extension on the deadline, and give me the resources I need to get it done? So yeah,
Awesome. I like that. Well, thanks for
thank you.
sharing a little bit more about the interview process. Now, I'm wondering, so you got through the resume, you talked to the hiring manager, you did the interview, and then boom, it's time for the internship. Well, tell us a little bit about your internship. What did you specifically work on, or tell us a little bit about a typical day? What did that typically look like?
Gotcha. So my interning experience was a little different than most. I kind of just started working full time. Like the work that they gave me was basically what a full time entry level engineer would be doing. And it consisted a lot of shadowing because specifically at Lockheed Martin, but honestly, any big corporate setting, there's a giant skill curve. And there's just so much that you have to pick up and learn that it's impossible to do it in a short amount of time. So you just have to learn as you go. So the easiest way to do that would be to shadow a more senior engineer, kind of watch what they do, work on assignments with them. If it's something manageable that you can do on your own, you kind of take the reins while they watch a little bit and supervise if necessary. I remember I did a lot of pair programming where I literally sit down with a senior engineer and we take turns coding. For example, if we're trying to fix some software defect and we've identified the software implementation, I would literally sit there while the senior buddy watches as I kind of go through and make the changes necessary. And then we'd switch. I'd watch him and then see his like line of thinking, how he would tackle a problem or go about actually implementing the fix.
Wow, I like that approach. Just take you and throw you in the deep end, and it's like,
Yeah.
okay, here you go. But even though they threw you right there into the deep end, and you're like, this is like entry level, engineering work. I love that they still incorporated the shadowing, the collaborative working environment where you had, somebody there to give you feedback, to guide you along the way. And it's not they threw me in the deep end, and this felt like a full time role, and I was expected to, meet these deadlines and meet these expectations. So it was nice. It was nice that you got to see the work right there up close and personal. Because some people say they do an internship and they're doing a lot of like maybe administrative work, or they give the intern the stuff that nobody else wants to do, and then you're like, I don't know if I'm going to really enjoy this internship. Is this really what I want to do? But it sounds like yours was very meaningful and helpful throughout.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm glad they did it that way because one, it gives you a really good exposure to what you'll be doing. And then
Mhm.
secondly, it makes you all that much more competitive than just say someone who did a lot of administrative or for lack of a better word, phrasing, grunt work.
Awesome. So when you were working with a lot of the different people during your internship in the software engineers, what did you appreciate most from them? Like, what kind of feedback did they give you, or what kind of professional development opportunities did they have to like help you to continue to grow as an intern?
I would say probably the number one thing that they did was probably one, I appreciate the fact that they corrected my mistakes because, again, there's so much to learn. You will inevitably screw up somewhere, but they took the approach of saying, hey, although this isn't, the standard in which we're accustomed to, I appreciate the work that you did, but here's how we would approach it. Or this is how our customers or the team lead is expecting the work to be done. So I would say that constructive feedback, like on the spot, like we're doing it this way rather than what you've already done, is what really helped me develop into a more capable and competent engineer. And another thing that they did for career development, I would say just the willingness to help. I feel like in some corporate settings or any work environment for that matter, there unfortunately are sometimes individuals who either don't have the time to help or they might even be unwilling to help. But I would say everyone who I came across in my interning experience really went out of their way to help when I needed it. And I definitely needed a lot of help because there's so many things you have to pick up. I was asking a ton of questions. Everyone was always more than willing to take 10 minutes, 20 minutes to explain a concept to me or to show me how this tool works or whatever question I may have ended up asking.
Nice. That's awesome. I mean, that's the whole point of an internship is for you to learn, to develop, to grow. And it's good to know that, you were able to take that critical feedback because some people get that feedback and they're like, maybe these people don't like me. Maybe this is not the place for me. And it's like, no, like, the folks are giving you feedback so you can learn and grow. And I think that's one thing that's really important about interning is being able to learn, to grow. Like you have to know that's your whole point of being there. It's not about doing everything perfect or trying to present as if everything is perfect. So I like that. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
of course, 100%.
Yeah, thanks for that. So after your internship, you ended up sticking around for a full-time role. So tell us about that. What do you think that you did during your internship? Like, there's some secrets. There's something that you did during that internship that, had them say, you know what, we need to keep Gabe on board and promote him. Tell us about it.
I would say primary thing that kind of helped me get that return offer was showing that I was one, malleable and adaptable. Because I've mentioned it so many times, but there's so much to learn when you are working for a company as large as Lockheed Martin. And a lot of these systems are legacy. They existed like many years before I was even born. So they use tools and coding languages and concepts that I was just totally unfamiliar with. So me showing them that one, I'm willing to sit here and gain as much knowledge from you as possible. So the person who is a senior engineer, you've been here much longer than I have, so you have this huge repository of information that I can really pick from. And then I showed them that I was also adaptable. I was exposed to many different teams, many different programs, many different tools and technologies that I was unfamiliar with, but I had to learn them on the fly. And I think me being able to pick that up so quickly and really go out of my way to talk to more senior engineers was what showed them, okay, hey, this guy can come in and he'll fit right into the workplace, he'll fit into their culture. He's already asking questions, which is what everyone does. I mean, I have coworkers who have been there 20 years, 25 years, even longer, who are still asking questions. They still go not only to the senior engineers, but I have people multiple years longer than me who are asking me questions about a niche that I'm more familiar with. So everyone is always learning and everyone's always adapting, which is a trait you absolutely need to thrive in an environment like that. And it's something I showed early on in my interning experience. So I think that's why they brought me back.
Nice. So you don't have to know everything from day one. It's okay if you don't know everything. But like you mentioned, there's so many different skills that you want to show through the entire process. That's awesome. Well, Gabe, tell us, is there any other tips or advice or anything at all that you want to share, maybe with someone who is looking for an internship or looking to become a software engineer at Lockheed Martin?
Okay, if you're looking for an internship, I would say, of course, brush up on the skills related to your degree field. That's always going to be one of the most important components of landing any role. But don't neglect let's say the extracurriculars, all of the other things surrounding the kind of core competencies you need for that job. Like, don't like be cautious or be conscious to highlight some of the skills that show your leadership abilities or your ability to speak well. Um, are you a charitable person? Are you involved in many organizations? Because all of these other extracurricular activities translates into you being a much more well-rounded individual. And they're always going to prefer someone who has those core competencies and well-roundedness over someone who's just laser focused on being a really good coder, being a really good engineer, et cetera. And then if you are currently in an internship and you're looking on how to be successful, I would say take initiative and ownership. If you if you make a mistake, always own up to it. Explain how, I guess, if needed, explain the circumstances that led you there and explain always how you're going to rectify the situation and always be communicative. Um, and in terms of taking ownership, just put yourself out there in the sense of like you are here to not only work, of course, but to develop the skills necessary to be the best engineer or best employee that you can be. So look for opportunities where you can really showcase your skills and maybe even go out of your way to pursue projects and tasking that you weren't personally assigned, but you may have personal interest in, or you might see a way to improve a certain process at your company. So you reach out to your manager or your team leader, whoever, and you propose a way to actually improve that, and you actually take the steps and ownership to execute or implement whatever plan you have.
Awesome. Thanks so much for sharing that, Gabe, and thanks for sharing everything that you've shared so far today.
Yeah, of course, no problem.
But we'll definitely have Gabe's information, like your LinkedIn page. We'll put it in the description so folks can find you on LinkedIn, maybe connect, ask some follow-up questions if they have it. But yes, thank you everyone for tuning in. Hopefully, you've gotten a lot from our conversation today. So, our goal is to share stories that help you build clarity, confidence, and connection for your next job, whether that's an internship, a full time role, or another opportunity. We'll be back soon with more conversations to help you become next job ready. Until next time, I'm your host, Amen, signing off.